Vine sat on the bed with her heartbeat fastened and knees hugging her breasts. She sighed once again, as she knows she has to accept whatever is coming down her fate. There is no way out now, so she wanted to stop thinking about it. But she couldn't. Her legs kept shaking in anxiety until she noticed him coming inside the room. She looked down. He entered while putting off his coat. His gaze fell on her and his eyes flickered. Jungkook, you haven't changed yet? She gets nervous hearing his voice, considering it was the first time she heard him. Earlier, she only looked at him from afar. The voice was deep and masculine, just like his upper body. Vine looked at him and said hesitatingly, I was going to. Jungkook nodded while putting off his shoes, casually, while she wanted to say that she was waiting for him to come, but she couldn't. She looked at him going inside the washroom. She sighed. Vine looked at him going inside and kept staring at him the whole time. Her shaking legs rested a bit. She was just sitting a few inches away from the deadliest mafia in the town. She didn't expect the first encounter like this. She rested her legs on the bed and waited for him to come outside so she can go and change. She looked at her surroundings in the meantime. Her eyes widened and her lips curled to smile a few times, looking at the paintings. After a few minutes, Jungkook came outside and saw her already leaning her head against the wall with her eyes closed. He stopped as he looked at her. He kept staring at her for a minute as he couldn't move his eyes away. He adored her. He didn't have the chance to clearly look at her until now. His eyes softened, and his tightened muscles from the whole day's tiredness finally relaxed a bit. Her cute and innocent face made him fall for her at the first sight. Looking at her, she was folding her arms and legs. He quickly took out a blanket from the closet and put it on her till her neck. As he reached her face, he looked at it from close. Again, he couldn't move his eyes away. He stayed there. He stayed there until his constant presence, so close to her, made her wake up. She opened her eyes slowly, and their eyes met. They looked at each other for a minute, until she blinked, making them come out of the deep oceans of each other's eyes. He cleared his throat and moved away from her, standing straight at his place without looking at her. She hesitatingly got up and said, Sorry, I slept without noticing. Jungkook. No, it's okay. I was pretty tired myself too. You can change and then sleep comfortably. He was going to his side of the bed. Then he noticed her looking at the blanket. Jungkook. Oh, and I thought you would be feeling cold, so. She smiled unknowingly. She didn't look at him and went to the washroom after taking her clothes. He smiled when she went inside as he noticed her nervousness earlier. He leaned against the wall of the bed and checked his phone while waiting for her to come outside to sleep together. She came after a few minutes with her casual clothes in a baggy t shirt and trousers. His attention went towards her. He kept looking at her again. She looked cute without makeup and overdressed, completely aware of his eyes on her. She shyly went to her side of the bed as she sneezed once, and then again and again, 3 times in a row, then sat on the bed. His eyes flickered, looking at her, his brows furrowed, and eyes showing visible care in them, as he asked, "You're okay, right?" She nodded and then replied, "It's fine. I'm just a little cold. If I rest." She sneezed again. Jungkook put his phone down and came close to her as he put his hand on her forehead, casually again, while she stopped for a moment at her place. She felt his big smooth hands on her face. She blushed without looking at him. The snow fell gently outside, turning the world in a soft, white wonderland. Inside, Jungkook finally noticed the shivers, the subtle signs that something was amiss. His keen eyes caught the way Vian's smile wavered, her eyes flickering with discomfort, not knowing it wasn't because of the cold, but because he was giving her butterflies. Ignoring the closeness between them, he said, "Your Why is your forehead so warm?" he said, and started checking her cheeks and neck. They were warmer. While she was frozen at her place all the time. "You have a fever, Brian," he said, genuine concern etched across his face. Without wasting a second, he took out the thermometer from his side drawer and asked her to open her mouth. She did, and he waited for a minute. She could look at the tension at his face without knowing why. Wasn't he heartless? She thought at the moment she saw him worrying about her. After a minute, he took it out to check the numbers, and she had high fever. He looked at her and said, "It's expected. It's already snowing outside, and you are wearing a sleeveless dress. What are we going to do about this now? What if it gets worse?" He asked her in subtle worry. She stopped him immediately as she said, "Fine. Why are you worrying so much? It will be fine once I sleep," she said calmly, in a low tone. He shook his head and got up to get warm water for her himself. After returning, he sat closely beside her and handed her the glass to drink it. She took a sip slowly, and she liked it very much. She gulped the whole of it and then looked at him. He helped her lie down on her back. "Jungkook, you should have said something sooner. You were sneezing really bad. I should have noticed," he said while covering her with the blanket. "Fine. I didn't want to spoil your mood. Besides, it's nothing." Jungkook stopped her with the reply. "Don't say it was nothing once more." "And what? You didn't want to spoil my mood? Taking care of my wife is a privilege, not something I would do only if I'm in a mood." A sudden pause between them as they locked their eyes with each other. Privilege? Did he say I was his privilege? The thought echoed in her mind. After a minute, Jungkook broke the eye contact to get some medicine for her, together with a bowl of cold water with a handkerchief. She didn't know what to say to him. He wasn't going to stop, nor did he let her speak. It was getting awkward. The sudden truth came out of her mouth unintentionally. Aren't you the heartless mafia leader? Jungkook stopped. She realized what she just said and wanted to beat herself for this. She closed her eyes as she said, "No, I didn't mean to ask that at all. Just, yes, I am dangerous and heartless too, but only for my enemies, not for you," he said, looking in her eyes, while his hand was covering her hand. The sudden warmth of his hand chilled in her. She felt shivers in her spine when his dangerous voice echoed in her ears again. "You don't worry about that. Just let me take care of you," he said, while rubbing a handkerchief on her arm. She stayed quiet after this. She caught sights of him multiple times, and every time he had tension in his eyes. "Jungkook, try to sleep if you can. I will stay here until you do." She smiled, from her heart, from deep within. She fell for him as she saw the care and tension in his eyes for her, and only her. The marriage she was so afraid of didn't seem scary anymore. She smiled and closed her eyes while trying to sleep. Or even if she couldn't, she decided to pretend it, so that he stops caring about her and sleeps as well. She closed her eyes without the intention of opening them again until the sun rises. He took care of her for the whole night. He himself was tired after the whole day and wanted to finally rest, but taking care of her seemed nothing like breaking even a sweat. He checked multiple times, and when he was fully sure that she slept, he took a sigh of relief. He put a hand on her forehead, and it was calmed a bit. After a few hours, she woke up, only to see his head resting on her arm. She stared at him and smiled. She brushed her fingers across his face and felt relieved, not wanting to disturb him. She closed her eyes again to sleep, or even if she couldn't, she would pretend it until he wakes up himself, knowing how tired he must have been all by himself.